At my son's wedding, his wife said, "Please keep the old lady out of the photos. Just take pictures of my mom." I walked away in silence. The following week, she fainted when she got the wedding bill. Subscribe to the channel for more stories like this, and comment the city you're watching from. I never imagined that the happiest day of my son's life would become the most humiliating day of mine. At 63, I thought I had experienced enough of life's cruelties to be prepared for anything. I was wrong. The morning of Samuel's wedding started like any other Saturday, except my heart was racing with excitement. I had been planning this day for months, not just as the mother of the groom, but as the secret financial architect behind every elegant detail. The ivory silk flowers cascading down the altar, the crystal chandeliers casting romantic shadows across the reception hall, the 7-course dinner that would leave guests talking for years. All of it funded by my life savings, my retirement nest egg that I had carefully built over decades of working double shifts as a nurse. Samuel didn't know. I wanted it to be a surprise, my final gift to launch him into married life without the burden of debt. After raising him alone since his father died when he was 12, after sacrificing so much to give him every opportunity, this felt like my crowning achievement as a mother. I arrived at the venue early, wearing the navy blue dress I had bought specifically for this occasion. It wasn't expensive. I couldn't afford expensive after quietly paying for everything else, but it was elegant and appropriate. Or so I thought. Aubrey appeared in the bridal suite doorway like a vision in white, her blonde hair perfectly styled, her makeup flawless. She looked beautiful, I'll give her that. But the moment her eyes landed on me, something cold flickered across her face. "Francis," she said, her voice tight. "You're here early. I wanted to see if you needed any help, dear," I replied, genuinely hoping to contribute something beyond money to this special day. "Is there anything I can do?" She exchanged a look with her mother, Margaret, who was adjusting Aubrey's veil with the precision of a master craftsman. Margaret had made it clear from the beginning that she considered herself the primary mother figure in this wedding planning process, despite the fact that I was funding it. "Actually," Aubrey said, her smile not reaching her eyes, "we have everything under control. Maybe you could help with something else." The dismissal stung, but I swallowed it. This was her day after all. The ceremony was beautiful. I sat in the front row watching my son pledge his life to this woman, my heart swelling with pride and love. Samuel looked so handsome in his tuxedo, so mature and confident. For a moment, I forgot about Aubrey's coldness and focused on the joy of seeing my baby boy become a husband. But it was during the photo session that everything changed. The photographer, a professional I had specifically requested and paid extra for, was organizing family shots. "Let's get the immediate family together," she called out cheerfully. "Parents and the happy couple." I stepped forward, smoothing my dress, ready to take my place beside Samuel. This was the moment I had been dreaming about, being photographed with my son on his wedding day. A memory we would treasure forever. That's when Aubrey's voice cut through the air like a knife. "Please avoid putting the old lady in the photos. Just photograph my mother with us." The words hit me like a physical blow. The photographer looked confused, glancing between Aubrey and me. Several guests who had been chatting nearby fell silent. The air seemed to thicken around us. "Aubrey," Samuel said quietly, but there was no real protest in his voice, no defense of his mother, just embarrassment. "I want clean, elegant photos," Aubrey continued, as if I weren't standing right there. "Margaret looks so sophisticated. We'll do separate shots with others later." Others? She couldn't even say my name. I felt heat rise to my cheeks, but not from anger, from shame. Deep, crushing shame that made my legs feel weak. Around us, people were staring, whispering. Margaret was trying to look sympathetic, but I could see the satisfaction in her eyes. She had won. She was the chosen mother. "Of course," I managed to say, my voice barely above a whisper. "I understand." But I didn't understand. I didn't understand how the woman my son loved could be so cruel. I didn't understand how Samuel could stand there and say nothing while his wife humiliated the woman who had raised him, sacrificed for him, loved him unconditionally. I stepped back, watching as they posed together, Samuel, Aubrey, and Margaret. The perfect family. The photographer clicked away, capturing memories that would last a lifetime. Memories that deliberately excluded me. I turned and walked away, my heels clicking against the marble floor of the reception hall. Behind me, I could hear the photographer calling for the next shot, the celebration continuing as if nothing had happened, as if I had never been there at all. I found myself in the ladies' room, gripping the marble countertop, staring at my reflection in the mirror. The woman looking back at me seemed older than 63. Her eyes were bright with unshed tears, her face flushed with humiliation. When had I become the old lady? When had I become someone to be hidden, to be ashamed of? I thought about all the nights I had worked extra shifts to pay for Samuel's college tuition. All the times I had eaten peanut butter sandwiches for dinner so he could have steak. All the sacrifices I had made gladly, lovingly, because that's what mothers do. And now, on what should have been one of the proudest days of my life, I was being erased from the picture. Literally. I pulled out my phone and looked at my bank account, at the depleted numbers that represented 37 years of careful saving. The catering bill, the venue rental, the flowers, the photographer who was now documenting my son's wedding without me in it. All paid for with money I would never get back. The irony was suffocating. I had secretly funded this entire wedding, down to the last detail, and I wasn't even welcome in the photographs. I stayed in that bathroom for 20 minutes trying to compose myself. When I finally emerged, the reception was in full swing. I watched from the periphery as Samuel and Aubrey danced their first dance, as Margaret gave a touching speech about gaining a son, as everyone celebrated this perfect union. No one seemed to notice that the mother of the groom was missing from the head table. No one seemed to care that I was sitting alone at a table in the back, picking at the expensive dinner I had paid for. As the evening wore on, I realized something that chilled me to the bone. This wasn't just about wedding photos. This was about my place in Samuel's life going forward. Aubrey had made her position clear. I was unwelcome, unwanted, an embarrassment to be hidden away. And Samuel had let it happen. I left quietly, before the cake cutting that I had paid for, before the champagne toast with wine I had selected. I kissed Samuel goodbye, told him I wasn't feeling well, and watched his relief that I was leaving early. The drive home was a blur of streetlights and tears. But somewhere between the wedding venue and my small apartment, something inside me shifted. The crushing shame began to transform into something else entirely. By the time I pulled into my driveway, I had made a decision that would change everything. The silence in my apartment felt different that night. Heavier. More final. I sat on my worn velvet couch, still in my navy dress, staring at the stack of receipts and payment confirmations spread across my coffee table. Each piece of paper represented a dream I had for this wedding. A hope that maybe, just maybe, I could buy my way back into my son's life. How foolish I had been. The catering invoice, $8,400. The venue rental, $12,000. The photographer who had just spent the evening capturing memories that deliberately excluded me, $3,500. The flowers that Aubrey had insisted on changing 3 times, $2,800. I picked up each receipt, my hands trembling slightly, and calculated the total in my head. $47,236. Nearly my entire retirement savings gone. For a wedding where I was treated like an unwelcome stranger. The phone rang, startling me from my calculations. Samuel's name appeared on the screen. For a moment, hope flickered in my chest. Maybe he had realized how wrong tonight had been. Maybe he was calling to apologize, to tell me he had spoken to Aubrey about her behavior. "Hi, sweetheart," I answered, trying to keep my voice steady. "Mom, hey." His voice sounded distant, distracted. "Listen, Aubrey felt really bad about the photo thing tonight. She was just stressed, you know? Wedding jitters and all that." Wedding jitters. As if casual cruelty could be explained away by nerves. "I see," I managed. "She wants you to know that she's planning to order some additional prints that include you. Maybe we can do a family session next month or something." Additional prints. Like I was an afterthought, a footnote to be added later. The humiliation burned fresh in my throat. "That's thoughtful of her," I lied. "Great. So we're good then?" I know tonight got a little awkward, but... "Samuel," I interrupted, surprising myself with the firmness in my voice. "Do you know who paid for your wedding?" A pause. "Well, Aubrey's parents contributed, and we saved up. I paid for it. All of it. Every single expense." The silence on the other end stretched so long I wondered if the call had dropped. What do you mean, all of it? His voice was different now, smaller. The venue, the catering, the flowers, the photographer who spent the evening making sure I wasn't in any pictures. Everything. I wanted it to be a surprise. A gift to start your marriage without debt. Another long pause. Then, Mom, you didn't have to. No, I didn't have to. I chose to. Because I love you. Because I wanted your wedding day to be perfect. I could hear him breathing on the other end, could almost see him processing this information, recalculating the evening's events through this new lens. Did Aubrey know? I asked quietly. Know what? That I was paying for everything. Did she know when she called me an old lady who needed to be kept out of the photos? The pause that followed told me everything I needed to know. Mom, it's complicated. It's not complicated, Samuel. It's simple. Your wife humiliated me at the wedding I paid for, and you let her do it. She was stressed and Margaret was there, and it just seemed easier. Easier. The word tasted bitter. It was easier to let your wife treat your mother like garbage than to stand up for the woman who raised you. That's not fair, Mom. You're being dramatic. Dramatic. There it was, the word I had heard so many times over the years whenever I dared to express hurt or disappointment. Whenever I asked for basic respect or consideration, I was being dramatic. You're right, I said quietly. I am being dramatic. I'm dramatically disappointed in the man I raised. Mom. Good night, Samuel. Congratulations on your marriage. I hung up before he could respond, my heart pounding with an emotion I couldn't quite name. It wasn't anger exactly. It wasn't even hurt anymore. It was something colder, more resolute. I walked to my bedroom and opened the closet, pulling out a small wooden box from the top shelf. Inside were all the documents from the wedding planning. Contracts, receipts, payment schedules. I had organized everything meticulously, proud of my ability to coordinate such an elaborate event. Now, looking at these papers, I saw them differently. They weren't evidence of my love and generosity. They were proof of my stupidity. I thought back to the conversation I had overheard 3 months ago, when I had arrived early to Samuel's apartment to drop off some family photos. I had my own key, and I walked in just as Aubrey was finishing a phone call with someone. I know, she had been saying, her voice carrying that particular tone of complaint. But what can I do? She's paying for everything, so I have to pretend to be grateful. The old bat keeps wanting to be involved in every decision. Old bat. Even then, even while I was writing checks to make her dreams come true, she had been mocking me behind my back. I had stood frozen in the hallway, listening as she continued. Trust me, once this wedding is over, I'm setting some serious boundaries. Samuel needs to choose between being a mama's boy and being a husband. I had quietly left that day without delivering the photos, but the words had stayed with me. I told myself I had misunderstood. That stress was making her say things she didn't mean. I convinced myself that once the wedding was over, once she felt secure in her marriage, things would improve. How naive I had been. Now, sitting in my bedroom with the weight of the evening pressing down on me, I understood the truth. Aubrey had known exactly who was funding her perfect day. She had known, and she had humiliated me anyway. She had treated me like an unwelcome intruder at the event I had made possible. And Samuel had let her do it. I picked up my laptop and logged into my online banking account. The wedding expenses had been automatically charged to my credit card and bank account over the past several months. Thousands of dollars flowing out in carefully planned installments. But not all of the payments had been processed yet. The final catering bill wasn't due until the following Tuesday. The photographer's remaining balance was scheduled to be charged on Thursday. The venue's damage deposit would be processed at the end of the week. My finger hovered over the mouse as I navigated to my payment settings. With a few clicks, I could cancel the automatic payments. I could stop the remaining charges from going through. The thought should have scared me, should have made me feel guilty. But instead, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years: power. For once in my life, I had a choice. I could continue to be the silent, generous mother who absorbed insults and humiliation with grace. Or I could teach my son and his wife that actions have consequences. I clicked on the first automatic payment and selected cancel, then the second, then the third. One by one, I watched the pending charges disappear from my account. The final tally. $14,800 in payments that would never be processed. As I closed the laptop, I felt lighter somehow. Not happy exactly, but free. Free from the illusion that my money could buy love or respect. Free from the desperate hope that if I just gave enough, sacrificed enough, I would finally be valued. I changed into my nightgown and prepared for bed, but sleep eluded me. Instead, I lay in the darkness, thinking about the woman I had been and the woman I was becoming. Tomorrow, Aubrey would start receiving calls from vendors. The caterer demanding payment for the final invoice. The photographer wanting to know why his check had been declined. The venue asking about the damaged deposit that never came through. And for the first time in 37 years of motherhood, I wouldn't be rushing to fix the problem. The thought should have kept me awake with worry. Instead, it was the first peaceful sleep I had had in months. The call came at 9:47 on Tuesday morning. I was in my kitchen, making coffee and enjoying the strange calm that had settled over me since Saturday night. The number on my phone screen was unfamiliar, but something told me I should answer. Mrs. Patterson? This is Linda from Elegant Affairs Catering. I'm calling about the outstanding balance for the Hartwell-Patterson wedding reception. My heart began to race, but my voice remained steady. What seems to be the problem? Well, ma'am, your payment was declined yesterday, and we need to resolve this immediately. The balance is $4,200, and our policy requires settlement within 48 hours of the event. I see. I sat down slowly, gripping the phone. And what happens if the payment isn't made? We'll have to pursue collection through our legal department, ma'am. We'll also be filing a report with credit agencies. This is quite unusual. We've never had this happen with such a large event. I closed my eyes, imagining Aubrey receiving similar calls from the photographer, the florist, the venue coordinator. Part of me felt sick with guilt. But a larger part felt something I hadn't expected, satisfaction. I understand, I told Linda. Someone will need to contact you about that payment. It won't be me. After I hung up, I sat in my kitchen for a long time, staring at my coffee cup. The phone rang again 20 minutes later. Samuel. Mom, what the hell is going on? His voice was tight with panic. Aubrey got a call from some catering company saying payments were declined. They're threatening to sue us. Are they? I kept my tone neutral, almost curious. Yes, they are. And it's not just them. The photographer called too. And the florist. Mom, what did you do? What did I do? The question hung in the air between us, loaded with accusation and disbelief. As if I were the one who had done something wrong. I stopped paying for a wedding where I wasn't welcome, I said simply. That's not, Mom, you can't just, there are contracts involved. Legal obligations. Yes, there are. And now you and your wife will need to figure out how to meet them. We don't have that kind of money. You know we don't. Aubrey's still paying off her student loans, and I just started the new job. Then perhaps you shouldn't have planned a wedding that cost more than your annual salary. The silence on the other end was deafening. I could practically hear him processing this, trying to find an angle, a way to make this my responsibility again. Mom, please. We're talking about $14,000 here. Do you have any idea what this could do to our credit? Our future? $14,000. The exact amount I had calculated when I canceled those payments. Money that represented months of my life, years of careful saving, decades of putting his needs before my own. I'm very aware of what $14,000 means, Samuel. I've been aware of it for months while I've been paying for your wedding. But we didn't ask you to. No, you didn't ask. You just accepted. You and your wife accepted my money while she called me an old bat behind my back, and made sure I was excluded from your wedding photos. Another pause. Longer this time. You heard that. So he knew. He knew Aubrey had been talking about me that way, and he had said nothing, done nothing. The betrayal cut deeper than I had expected. Yes, I heard it. And I saw how she treated me on Saturday night. And I saw how you stood there and let her do it. Mom, marriage is about compromise. I can't fight every battle. I'm not asking you to fight every battle, Samuel. I was asking you to fight for your mother. Once. Just once. My voice cracked on those last words, the pain finally breaking through the calm facade I had been maintaining. Look, he said, his tone shifting to something more calculated, more persuasive. What if Aubrey apologizes? What if we all sit down and talk this through like adults? Adults. As if I were the child in this situation. As if I were the one behaving unreasonably. It's too late for apologies, Samuel. It's never too late, Mom. We're family. Family. The word that had been used to justify so much neglect, so much disrespect, so many years of taking me for granted. If we're family, I said quietly, then why wasn't I in your wedding photos? He didn't have an answer for that. After I hung up, I walked to my living room and sat in my favorite chair, the one by the window that looked out onto the small garden I had been tending for 15 years. The roses were blooming, their red petals bright against the green foliage. I had planted them the year after Samuel graduated college, when I finally had time to think about something other than his needs. The phone rang again. This time it was a number I didn't recognize, but when I answered, Aubrey's voice came through, tight and strained. Francis, we need to talk. Do we? Yes, we do. This whole situation has gotten completely out of hand. I understand you're upset about Saturday night, but this is ridiculous. You're jeopardizing our financial future over a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding. That's what she was calling it. What exactly did I misunderstand, Aubrey? Look, I was stressed. It was my wedding day. I wasn't thinking clearly when I made that comment about the photos. I never meant to hurt your feelings. Hurt my feelings. As if this were about wounded pride rather than basic human dignity. And the conversation I overheard 3 months ago? When you called me an old bat. Was that stress too? The silence that followed was different from Samuel's pauses. This was the silence of someone who had been caught, who was frantically trying to figure out how much I knew. I don't know what you think you heard. I know exactly what I heard, Aubrey. Just like I know exactly what happened on Saturday night. You deliberately humiliated me at the wedding I paid for, and now you're surprised that there are consequences. Francis, please. Be reasonable. We can work this out. What if I write you a check for part of the wedding costs? What if we set up a payment plan? The desperation in her voice was unmistakable now. Good. Let her feel desperate for once. Let her experience the panic of not knowing how she was going to pay her bills. With what money, Aubrey? According to Samuel, you don't have $14,000 lying around. We'll figure something out. We'll borrow from my parents or your parents. The ones who contributed nothing to this wedding, but were prominently featured in all the photographs. That's not fair. Isn't it? Your mother got to pose with you and Samuel for all the important pictures. She got to be treated like family, while I, the woman who actually funded this entire event, was told to stay out of the way because I was too old and ugly to be seen. I never said you were ugly. You didn't need to say it, Aubrey. Your actions made your feelings perfectly clear. I could hear her breathing heavily on the other end, could practically feel her frustration radiating through the phone. Fine, she said, her voice hardening. You want to play hardball? Let's play hardball. Those vendors are going to come after all of us, you know. Your name is on those contracts too. You think you can just walk away from this without consequences? There it was. The threat. The attempt to scare me back into compliance. Actually, Aubrey, I think you'll find that most of those contracts were signed by you and Samuel as the happy couple. My name appears only on the payment authorizations, which I have now revoked. You can't do that. It's illegal. It's fraud. No, dear. It would be fraud if I had promised to pay and then deliberately deceived you. But I never promised anything. I simply chose to stop being generous to people who treat me with contempt. The conversation ended with her hanging up on me, but not before I heard something in the background that made my blood run cold. Laughter. Male laughter that sounded suspiciously like Samuel's. Had he been listening to this entire conversation? Had they planned this call together, strategizing about how to manipulate me back into paying their bills? The thought made me feel sick, but it also strengthened my resolve. If they thought I was just a foolish old woman they could bully back into submission, they were about to learn otherwise. I spent the rest of the day in my garden, pulling weeds and watering my roses. The physical activity helped calm my mind, helped me process the enormity of what I had set in motion. By evening I had received 6 more calls from vendors. I let them all go to voicemail, but I listened to each message. The florist, demanding payment for the elaborate arrangements that had decorated the ceremony. The photographer, threatening legal action if his final payment wasn't received by Friday. The venue coordinator, explaining that the damage deposit was being withheld due to non-payment. Each message was another nail in the coffin of my old life. The life where I had been valued only for what I could provide. And surprisingly, I found I didn't miss that life at all. That night, as I prepared for bed, I caught sight of myself in the bathroom mirror. The woman looking back at me didn't look like the defeated, humiliated person who had fled the wedding reception 4 days ago. She looked like someone who had finally remembered her own worth. They came on Thursday evening just as I was finishing dinner. I heard the car doors slam with unnecessary force, heard their footsteps marching up my front walkway like soldiers preparing for battle. When the doorbell rang, followed immediately by sharp, insistent knocking, I knew my peaceful week of solitude was over. I took my time answering, finishing the last sip of my tea and placing the cup carefully in the sink. Through the peephole, I could see them both standing on my porch, Samuel with his jaw set in that stubborn way he'd had since childhood, and Aubrey beside him, her face flushed with anger and something else I couldn't quite identify. Desperation, maybe. "Hello," I said calmly as I opened the door, not inviting them in. "Mom, we need to talk." Samuel's voice was tight, controlled, but I could hear the strain underneath. "This has gone too far." "Has it?" I remained in the doorway, my hand resting on the door frame. "How exactly has it gone too far?" Aubrey stepped forward, her designer purse clutched in her manicured hands like a weapon. "Francis, you're destroying our lives over nothing. Over a stupid misunderstanding that we've both apologized for." "Have you apologized? I must have missed that." Her face reddened. "I called you. I explained that I was stressed. You called to threaten me with legal action when your manipulation didn't work. That's quite different from an apology." Samuel ran his hand through his hair, a gesture I recognized from his teenage years when he was frustrated about not getting his way. "Mom, can we please come inside and discuss this like civilized people?" I stepped back and opened the door wider, but my posture remained unwelcoming. They entered my small living room, Aubrey's eyes immediately scanning the space with the kind of calculating assessment I had grown accustomed to. She had always looked at my modest home this way, as if she were mentally cataloging its shortcomings. "Sit down," I said, taking my own seat in my favorite chair. They chose the couch, sitting close together in a united front that spoke volumes about how they viewed this conversation. "Mom," Samuel began, his tone softer now, more pleading. "I know Saturday night didn't go the way any of us wanted." "Stop." I held up my hand. "Don't you dare minimize what happened. Your wife publicly humiliated me at the wedding I secretly funded. And you stood there and let her do it. Those are facts, not interpretations." Aubrey leaned forward, her voice taking on a sickeningly sweet tone. "Francis, I've been thinking about this all week. And I realize I handled things poorly. I was overwhelmed and I took it out on you. That wasn't fair." I studied her face, looking for any sign of genuine remorse. What I saw instead was the practiced expression of someone who had learned that apologies were just another tool for getting what she wanted. "And what exactly are you apologizing for, Aubrey?" For the photo situation. For making you feel excluded. Making me feel excluded." I repeated her words slowly. "Is that what happened? I felt excluded? It wasn't that you literally excluded me from your wedding photos while knowing I had paid for everything." Her mask slipped slightly. "Look, I said I was sorry. What more do you want?" "I want honesty. I want you to acknowledge what you actually did instead of hiding behind euphemisms and excuses." Samuel shifted uncomfortably. "Mom, she's trying to apologize. Can't you just accept it and move on?" "Move on to what, exactly? To pretending that nothing happened? To going back to the way things were, where I'm expected to be grateful for whatever scraps of attention you throw my way?" "That's not how it is," Samuel protested, but his voice lacked conviction. "Isn't it? When was the last time you called me just to talk, Samuel? Not because you needed something, not because there was some obligation or crisis, but just because you wanted to hear my voice." The silence that followed was deafening. He opened his mouth, then closed it, clearly unable to come up with an answer. Aubrey, however, had no such difficulty. "This is ridiculous. We didn't come here to be psychoanalyzed. We came here because you're being vindictive and childish, and it needs to stop. There it was. The real Aubrey, the one who emerged when her sweet manipulation didn't work. Vindictive, I repeated, for refusing to pay bills that aren't my responsibility. You promised to pay for the wedding. No, Aubrey, I didn't. I chose to pay for your wedding as a gift. But gifts come with the expectation of basic respect and gratitude. When you fail to show either, the gift stops being given. Samuel leaned forward, his hands clasped tightly together. Mom, even if we accept that you're upset about Saturday night, don't you think this punishment is disproportionate to the crime? We're talking about our entire financial future here. Your financial future was never my responsibility, Samuel. You're 34 years old. You have a college degree that I paid for, a wife with a professional job, and presumably the ability to make your own way in the world. But we can't afford $14,000 in unexpected bills. Then you couldn't afford that wedding. But you had it anyway, because you assumed I would always be there to clean up your messes. Aubrey stood up abruptly, her composure finally cracking completely. This is insane. You're punishing us because your feelings got hurt. Do you have any idea what this is doing to us? The stress? The sleepless nights? I looked up at her, this beautiful young woman who had everything in the world going for her except basic human decency, and felt something cold settle in my chest. Yes, Aubrey, I do know about stress and sleepless nights. I know about working double shifts for years to pay for my son's education. I know about sacrificing everything I wanted so he could have everything he needed. I know about lying awake wondering if I was doing enough, giving enough, loving enough. My voice was rising now, years of suppressed frustration finally finding their way to the surface. I know about the stress of planning and paying for a wedding while pretending it wasn't bankrupting me. I know about the sleepless nights I spent wondering why my son's fiancé seemed to hate me, why nothing I did was ever good enough. I never said I hated you. You didn't need to say it. The words exploded out of me with more force than I had intended. You showed it every single day. Every eye roll when I spoke, every suggestion you dismissed, every conversation you steered away from me. And then when I had given you everything I had, you made sure I knew exactly how little I mattered to you. Samuel was staring at me with something that might have been shock. In 34 years, he had rarely seen me lose my composure like this. Mom, I'm not finished. I stood up, my entire body trembling with emotion. You want to know what's insane, Aubrey? What's insane is that I spent $47,000 on a wedding for people who couldn't even be bothered to include me in the family photos. What's insane is that I drained my retirement savings to make your dream day perfect, while you called me an old bat behind my back. You don't understand the pressure I was under. I understand pressure perfectly. I understand the pressure of being a single mother working 3 jobs to keep food on the table. I understand the pressure of choosing between paying my own bills and paying for my son's college tuition. What I don't understand is how someone can accept that level of sacrifice from another person and then treat them like garbage. The room fell silent except for the sound of my own ragged breathing. I realized I was shaking, not from fear or anxiety, but from the sheer relief of finally speaking my truth. Samuel was the first to break the silence. Mom, I had no idea you felt this way. Of course you didn't, because you never asked. You never wondered why I was always working, why I never went on vacations, why I drove a 15-year-old car while paying for your brand new one. I thought you wanted to help. I thought you were happy to do it. I was happy to help. But I wasn't happy to be taken for granted. I wasn't happy to be treated like an ATM instead of a person. Aubrey, who had been silent during this exchange, suddenly spoke up. So what now? You're just going to destroy our credit and our marriage because you want us to grovel. I turned to look at her. This woman who still didn't understand what she had done wrong. No, Aubrey. I'm going to let you handle your own responsibilities like the adults you claim to be. If that destroys your credit or your marriage, then maybe those things weren't as solid as you thought. But we're family, Samuel said desperately. Family helps each other. You're right. Family does help each other. Family also respects each other, includes each other, and stands up for each other. When you start treating me like family instead of like a bank account, we can talk about what family means. I walked to the front door and opened it, a clear signal that our conversation was over. I think you should leave now. Samuel stood slowly, his face pale. Mom, please. Don't do this. We can fix this. Some things can't be fixed, Samuel. They can only be endured or ended. I'm choosing to end this pattern. Aubrey stormed past me without another word, but Samuel paused in the doorway. I love you, Mom. The words hung in the air between us, heavy with years of complicated history and unspoken resentments. I love you too, Samuel. That's why I'm doing this. After they left, I closed the door and leaned against it, my whole body sagging with exhaustion. But underneath the fatigue was something else, something I hadn't felt in years. For the first time in my adult life, I had stood up for myself completely. I had spoken my truth without apology or qualification. I had chosen my own dignity over their approval. And despite everything, despite the pain and the uncertainty of what came next, it felt like freedom. 3 weeks after the confrontation, I did something I hadn't done in 27 years. I booked a vacation. Not a long weekend visiting Samuel, not a quick trip to see my sister in Ohio, but a real vacation. 2 weeks in Tuscany, staying in a small villa I found online, with cooking classes and wine tours and absolutely no obligations to anyone but myself. The decision came to me while I was sitting in my kitchen, looking at my bank statement. For the first time in decades, I had money left over at the end of the month. Real money. The automatic transfers that had been quietly draining my account for years. Samuel's car payment, his health insurance, the monthly loan that was never paid back, had all stopped when I finally found the courage to cancel them. I stared at the numbers on the screen, hardly believing what I was seeing. Without the constant outflow of money to support Samuel and his lifestyle, I was actually financially comfortable. More than comfortable. I had enough saved to live well, to enjoy the retirement I had been putting off indefinitely. The realization hit me like a physical blow. I was 63 years old, and I had been living like a pauper while supporting 2 grown adults who treated me like an inconvenience. That's when I called the travel agent. Italy. My friend Margaret asked when I told her about my plans over lunch the following week. Francis, that's wonderful. When was the last time you took a real vacation? I had to think about it. 1996, I said finally. Samuel was in high school, and I took him to Florida for spring break. That was 27 years ago. And it doesn't count if you took your son. She was right, of course. Every trip I had taken in the past 3 decades had been centered around Samuel's needs or interests. His graduation, his job interviews, his wedding planning. I couldn't remember the last time I had gone somewhere simply because I wanted to. The planning process felt strange and foreign. Choosing restaurants based on what I wanted to eat, not what someone else would tolerate. Booking activities that interested me, without having to consider anyone else's preferences or schedule. For the first time in my adult life, I was planning something that was entirely selfishly mine. Samuel called twice during my preparation week, both times going straight to voicemail. I listened to the messages but didn't return the calls. The first was apologetic, asking if we could talk things through. The second was angry, accusing me of being stubborn and unreasonable. Neither deserved a response. Aubrey, meanwhile, had apparently discovered social media as a weapon. Through a mutual friend, I learned that she had been posting cryptic messages about toxic family members and having to cut negative people out of your life for your mental health. The irony was so thick I actually laughed out loud when I heard about it. Let her paint me as the villain in her story. I knew the truth, and for the first time that was enough. The flight to Rome was my first time traveling alone internationally. I had expected to feel nervous or lonely, but instead I felt exhilarated. No one to accommodate, no one to wait for, no one whose needs had to come before my own. I read a book during the entire flight, a luxury I hadn't allowed myself in years. The villa was everything the website had promised and more. Perched on a hillside overlooking rolling vineyards, with a terrace perfect for morning coffee and evening wine. My room had French doors that opened onto a small balcony, and I spent my first morning there just breathing in the warm Italian air and marveling at the silence. No phone calls demanding my attention. No guilt trips about missed family dinners. No subtle or not so subtle hints about money troubles that somehow always became my responsibility to solve. Just peace. I joined the cooking class on my 3rd day, nervous about being the only solo traveler in a group of couples and friends. But Maria, our instructor, immediately made me feel welcome. "You are here alone?" she asked in her charmingly accented English as we prepared fresh pasta. Yes, just me. Brava. She clapped her hands together. Is very brave. Very, how you say, independent. I admire this. The other participants echoed her sentiment. A young couple from Australia told me they wished they had my courage to travel solo. An older man from Germany, there with his wife of 40 years, said he envied my freedom to explore at my own pace. Freedom. The word kept coming up in conversations, and each time it did, I felt something shift inside me. I was free. For the first time since I became a mother at 29, I was truly completely free. On my 5th day, I met Elena at the local market. She was about my age, a widow who had moved to Tuscany from Milan after her husband died 5 years earlier. I come here to start new life, she told me as we shared a bottle of Chianti at a small cafe overlooking the town square. My children, they think I am crazy. They want me to move close to them to help with grandchildren, to be Nana who cooks and cleans and babysits. And you didn't want that? She shrugged, a gesture so quintessentially Italian that it made me smile. I love my children. I love my grandchildren. But I love Elena too. And Elena, she want to see world, to learn painting, to have adventures. Children, they are grown. They have own lives. Why should Elena not have own life too? Her words resonated with something deep inside me. Why shouldn't I have my own life? Why had I been so willing to make myself smaller and smaller to accommodate everyone else's needs and expectations? My son is angry with me, I confided. I stopped helping him financially. He thinks I'm being cruel. Elena studied my face with the kind of directness I had forgotten people were capable of. You are not cruel. You are awake. Is different thing. We spent the rest of the afternoon walking through the narrow streets, talking about our children, our sacrifices, our dreams deferred and dreams rediscovered. When she invited me to join her and her friends for dinner, I accepted without hesitation. The dinner was at a small trattoria owned by Elena's friend Giuseppe. The food was incredible. Handmade gnocchi in a sauce that tasted like summer, lamb so tender it fell apart at the touch of a fork, wine that made everything taste better, and every conversation more interesting. But it wasn't just the food that nourished me. It was the easy acceptance of Elena's circle of friends, the way they included me without question or judgment. These were people who had chosen to build new lives after loss, who had refused to let their stories end with their roles as spouses or parents. You seem different than when you arrived, Elena observed on my last night. We were sitting on her terrace, sharing a bottle of Prosecco and watching the sunset paint the valley in shades of gold and amber. Different how? Lighter. Like you put down heavy suitcase you've been carrying long time. She was right. I did feel lighter. The constant knot of anxiety in my stomach, the one I had carried for so long I thought it was just part of aging, had dissolved. The tension in my shoulders, the headaches that had become my constant companion, the exhaustion that went bone deep, all of it was gone. I think I did put down a heavy suitcase, I said. Several of them, actually. Elena smiled. Is good. Suitcases are for traveling, not for living. When you stop moving, you put them down. That night, I lay in my comfortable bed in the villa, listening to the night sounds of the Italian countryside, and tried to remember the last time I had felt this content. Not happy in the frantic, desperate way I used to feel when Samuel would occasionally call or visit, but genuinely content with my own company and my own choices. I couldn't remember ever feeling this way before. On the plane home, I found myself dreading the return to my old life. But as we descended into the familiar skyline of my city, I realized something important. I wasn't returning to my old life. That life, the one where I sacrificed everything for people who took me for granted, was over. I had tasted freedom and I wasn't giving it back. There were 17 messages on my answering machine when I walked into my apartment. 15 were from vendors still trying to collect payment for Samuel's wedding expenses. One was from my sister checking in, and one was from Samuel himself. I deleted the vendor messages without listening to them fully. I called my sister back and told her about my wonderful trip. And Samuel's message? I listened to it twice. Mom, I don't know where you are, but Aubrey left me. She said she couldn't handle the stress of the wedding debt and everything else. She's moved back in with her parents. I don't know what to do. Please call me back. I need you. I need you. The words that had controlled my life for 34 years. The words that had made me drop everything, sacrifice everything, forgive everything. I sat with the phone in my hand for a long time, thinking about the woman I had been 3 weeks ago. That woman would have called back immediately. She would have rushed over with food and comfort and probably a checkbook. She would have fixed whatever could be fixed and endured whatever couldn't be. But I wasn't that woman anymore. I erased the message and unpacked my suitcase, pulling out the small gifts I had bought for myself. A silk scarf from Florence, a bottle of olive oil from the villa's own trees, a small watercolor painting I had created in Elena's art class. Tomorrow I would start my new life. Tonight, I would open a bottle of the Chianti I had brought home and toast the woman I was becoming. For the first time in my life, that woman was enough. 6 months later, I was repotting my orchids when the doorbell rang. Through the window, I could see Samuel standing on my porch, looking thinner than I remembered. His shoulders hunched in a way that made him seem younger and more vulnerable. He was alone. I took my time washing the soil from my hands, considering whether to answer. The woman I used to be would have flung the door open immediately, would have rushed to comfort him before even hearing what was wrong. But I had learned the value of pausing, of choosing my responses instead of simply reacting. When I finally opened the door, we stood looking at each other for a long moment. He looked tired, older somehow, with lines around his eyes that hadn't been there 6 months ago. "Hi, Mom." "Samuel." I didn't invite him in, not yet. "How are you?" "I've been better." He shifted his weight from one foot to the other, a gesture I remembered from his childhood when he was working up the courage to confess some wrongdoing. "Can we talk?" I stepped aside and let him enter, but I didn't offer coffee or fuss over him the way I used to. We sat in my living room, the same room where we'd had our last confrontation, but the dynamic felt different now. I was calmer, more centered. He was the one who seemed nervous and uncertain. "I know I don't have the right to ask anything of you," he began, his voice quiet. "But I wanted you to know that I've been thinking about what you said, about how I treated you, about the wedding." I waited, saying nothing. One thing I had learned during my months of solitude was the power of silence, of letting other people fill the space with their own truths. Aubrey left me 4 months ago. The divorce was finalized last week. "I'm sorry to hear that." And I was, though not in the way I would have been before. I was sorry for his pain, but I didn't feel responsible for fixing it. "She said I was too dependent on you. That I was a mama's boy who couldn't stand up to his own mother." He laughed bitterly. "The irony is that she was right about the mama's boy part, but wrong about everything else. I couldn't stand up to her. I never stood up for you when I should have." I remained silent, letting him continue. "I've been going to therapy. Dr. Henderson, do you remember her? She helped me when I was having trouble in high school." I nodded. I remembered driving him to those appointments, paying for them, worrying about whether they were helping. "She's been helping me understand some things about myself, about our relationship, about the patterns I learned growing up." "What patterns?" He was quiet for a moment, gathering his thoughts. "I learned that love meant sacrifice, that if someone really cared about me, they would give up things for me. And I learned that my needs were more important than other people's feelings." The honesty in his voice surprised me. This wasn't the defensive, manipulative Samuel who had stood in this same room 6 months ago demanding that I fix his problems. "Where did you learn those things, Samuel?" "From you." The words came out quietly, but they hit like a physical blow. "Not because you intended to teach them to me, but because that's what I saw. You sacrificing everything for me, never asking for anything in return, never setting boundaries. I thought that was what love looked like." I felt something crack open in my chest, a pain that was different from the anger and betrayal I had carried for so long. This was the pain of recognition, of seeing how my own wounds had inadvertently wounded my child. "I never wanted you to learn that," I whispered. "I know you didn't. Dr. Henderson helped me see that you were doing the best you could with what you had, that you were probably trying to give me the kind of love you wished you had received." Tears stung my eyes. He was right, of course. Every sacrifice I had made for him had been driven by my own childhood hunger for unconditional love, for someone who would put my needs first. I had been trying to heal my own wounds by being the mother I had wished for. "But here's what I'm learning," Samuel continued. "What I should have learned a long time ago. Love isn't supposed to be one-sided. It's not supposed to require one person to disappear so the other person can shine. Real love is about seeing each other, respecting each other, supporting each other. And how do you feel about that? About learning that? Scared, he admitted. Because it means I have to figure out how to love people without consuming them. It means I have to be worthy of love instead of just expecting it. We sat in silence for a while, both of us processing the weight of his words. Outside, I could hear children playing in the neighborhood, their laughter carrying on the afternoon breeze. I want to try, he said finally, to have a real relationship with you. One where I see you as a person, not just as my mother. One where I give as much as I take. What does that look like to you? I don't know yet. I'm still figuring it out. But maybe it starts with me asking how you are instead of assuming you exist just to worry about me. I studied his face, looking for signs of manipulation or performance. What I saw instead was vulnerability, genuine uncertainty, and something that might have been hope. How are you, Mom? Really? Are you okay? The question was so simple, but no one had asked it in years. Not really asked it, expecting a real answer instead of just a polite reassurance. I'm better than I've been in a long time, I said honestly. I'm learning who I am when I'm not trying to be everything to everyone else. What have you learned? I smiled, thinking about my trip to Italy, about the art classes I had started taking, about the book club I had joined where we discussed novels instead of family drama. I've learned that I like traveling alone. I've learned that I'm actually quite good at watercolor painting. I've learned that I can make friends who like me for who I am, not for what I can do for them. That sounds wonderful. It is wonderful. For the first time in my adult life, I'm living for myself. Not selfishly, just authentically. Samuel nodded slowly. I want to learn how to do that too. To live authentically instead of just taking whatever I can get from whoever is willing to give it. It's harder than it sounds, I warned him. It means disappointing people sometimes. It means saying no when you want to say yes just to keep the peace. Like when you said no to paying for the wedding bills. Exactly like that. I hated you for that, he said quietly. For weeks, I hated you. I told everyone who would listen that you had abandoned me, that you were cruel and vindictive. And now I think it was the most loving thing you could have done. Not just for yourself but for me. I needed to learn that my actions have consequences. I needed to learn that other people's generosity isn't infinite. I felt something shift inside me, a loosening of tension I hadn't even realized I was still carrying. I've been afraid, I admitted. Afraid that standing up for myself meant I didn't love you anymore. Afraid that setting boundaries meant I was failing as a mother. You're not failing, Mom. If anything, you're succeeding in a way you never did before. You're showing me what it looks like to have self-respect. We talked for another hour, carefully, tentatively, like two people learning a new language. He told me about his job, about the apartment he was renting, about the loneliness he was learning to sit with instead of immediately trying to fill. I told him about my art classes, about my growing circle of friends, about the peace I had found in my own company. When he got up to leave, he paused at the door. Would it be okay if I called you sometime? Not because I need something, just to talk. I'd like that, I said, and meant it. And maybe when you're ready we could have dinner sometime. My treat. I'd like to hear more about your trip to Italy. I'd like that too. After he left, I sat in my garden for a long time, watching the evening light filter through the leaves of my apple tree. The roses I had planted years ago were blooming magnificently, their fragrance filling the air with sweetness. I thought about the woman I had been a year ago, desperate for love and acceptance, willing to sacrifice anything to feel needed. That woman felt like a stranger to me now, someone I could look back on with compassion but no longer with identification. The woman I was now understood something that had taken me 63 years to learn. Love that requires you to disappear isn't love at all. It's something else entirely. Something that feeds on sacrifice and thrives on inequality. Real love, I had discovered, was what I felt sitting in my garden on this peaceful evening. Love for the life I had built, for the boundaries I had learned to set, for the person I had become when I finally stopped trying to earn approval and started living according to my own values. Samuel might learn to love me this way or he might not. Either way I would be fine. I had learned to love myself, and that was enough. The phone rang inside the house, but I didn't rush to answer it. Whatever it was could wait. Right now, I was exactly where I wanted to be. Exactly who I wanted to be. Surrounded by the beauty I had created in my own small corner of the world. For the first time in my life, I was truly completely at peace. And that peace was mine. I had earned it, fought for it, and learned to protect it. No one could take it away from me now because I finally understood its value. The woman who had been humiliated at her son's wedding, who had been called an old lady and excluded from family photos, was gone. In her place was someone stronger, someone who knew her worth, someone who had learned that the most important relationship she would ever have was the one with herself. The roses continued to bloom around me as darkness fell, their beauty visible even in the twilight. Like me, they had learned to flourish not despite their thorns, but because of them.